Welcome to this week's Silicon Slopes Town Hall, which is going to be all about economic issues and whether or not my mustache is going to fill out like it was previously filled out. Maybe we'll start with the economic issues and see if we have time for the mustache piece. We're bringing on Traeger Grill CEO Jeremy Andrus, who's chairing the Silicon Slopes Economic Response Committee, to give us an update. And I'm going to start with you, Jeremy, on where everything stands and how you're feeling about the state of business given coronavirus.
So I don't need to start by addressing the mustache.
No, I mean, I do want you to comment on it for sure at some point in this thing.
I will.
You just don't just start to.
Slide number 4, I get to it. Clint, first of all, it's been 8 weeks since this thing hit. Call it 9. And I got to tell you, when you think about what the state has gone through in terms of understanding what we're dealing with and really thinking about, what are the implications from an economic uncertainty perspective, it's pretty profound. Just how little time has lapsed, but how much we've learned, how long it feels like this has been. And we're still in the middle of this learning phase. I'd love to, if it's okay, throw up a few slides just to review some of the things that we are finding that I think are notable. First of all, when the governor laid out his plan, Clint, do you see that in full presentation mode?
You're not in presentation mode, but we can see it. Yep, there you go. Now you're in it.
There we go. He described the first phase as being the urgent phase, and that's like really just getting some level of grasp over the community health piece, and then we would in 8 to 12 weeks begin to move towards what he called a stabilization phase. And the good news is that we're at sort of 8 weeks since that plan was laid out, and we are definitely moving towards that stabilization phase. And I think small businesses in Utah, although they've been hit and they're feeling the pain, they're also they're feeling some level of optimism that there is something that they can now do to begin to swim upstream from a business perspective. So I want to start by just talking about where are we in Utah from an economic perspective. So here's some unemployment claims data. Pretty staggering when you look at the spike that happened sort of middle of April. All of 2019, Utah had 63,000 unemployment claims. In a single week in April, we had 33,000 claims. And so we really felt it. And fortunately, from that third week in April, we've started to see, or actually early April, we've started to see it back off a little bit. I think there are a couple of things. Number one, companies acted quickly. Number two, I think it's worth noting that we've had reasonable success with the PPP program. And that's probably one of the things that has given some small business owners some confidence to manage from a team perspective. All of that said, we're already 2.5 times the total unemployment claims for 2019, and that's a pretty staggering number. We've seen the time it takes to process unemployment benefits increase to 3 to 4 weeks. So that's just the reality of what we're dealing with right now. Here's the good news. Having moved into the stabilization phase, where on May 1st, the governor recommended that certain types of businesses which were closed were able to reopen, that's provided some optimism. So we've seen personal care services, gyms, restaurants that now have dine-in. They are slowly coming back and reopening their businesses. And I think the net of that is, when you're closed, you're closed. when you're not allowed to do anything, you simply, there's no ability to be sort of resourceful. There's no ability to adapt, to pivot in strategy. You're simply closed. And what's interesting is that getting beyond this May 1st date, as we look at the pulse survey that we do every week, I would say that it's the first time in the 6 weeks that we've been doing the pulse survey that we've actually sensed some real optimism. Now, hard to know if, there are some points where the absence of pain feels good. And my guess is we're feeling a little bit of that right now. I mean, there's been real pain. And so I think there is some optimism. Small business owners, for example, are significantly more optimistic than they were in the prior week. So 2 times as many firms believe that they will survive this relative to a couple of weeks ago. The Utah talent pool feels some greater sense of optimism. A month ago, 49% believed it was unlikely that they would be furloughed or laid off. That number has risen to 67%. I suspect that part of that is employees feeling some stabilization in their business, and that's creating some real improvement. I would say from a mental and emotional health perspective, we continue to see that concerns increase. And I just think this is 8-9 weeks in, it's taking a toll. There is no question that although we are seeing an uptick in optimism, we are far from being out of the woods. And I think people are. I think those in business are feeling early fatigue from the mental and emotional health perspective, and that's just something that we've seen climb week by week as we've done this survey. Lastly, and important to note, as we poll employers, 60% of them say that training is the most important factor as they think about unemployed individuals. They want real confidence that there is some level of sort of skills assessment and training and capability that they bring. And that's something that we've been on the economic committee giving a fair bit of thought to as well. Just a few quotes. You know what? The qualitative feedback is a little bit all over the place. You've got some sectors that feel like they're moving in the right direction. They feel optimistic. So those are the ones that effectively have been able to pivot around their business operation. There is some demand. They need to run their business differently. And we're seeing actually a nice degree of resourcefulness and adaptability to the environment. Some simply are swimming upstream. I mean, you think about it, I included a quote from the hospitality industry. It's just bleak. I mean, it's just like there's just no demand. And so not only is there lack of demand, but a suggestion that even being open is perhaps the wrong thing in terms of public sentiment. So you know what? Nice to see from a quantitative perspective some increase in just optimism, but no question when you sort of peel this back a little bit, it's messy and it's painful. PPP program. I'll go quickly through a couple of these. This one's interesting. We spent a lot of time early in the economic committee really focusing on educating small businesses on how they access funds, not just PPP, but this was sort of the one that was most appealing. What we found is that this went very quickly the first time around. The funds, as soon as banks got up and operational, they really dried up quickly. And so Congress eventually approved another $310 billion. About 60% of that has been committed. But interestingly, it's going much slower than was contemplated. And there are a number of reasons for that, or reasons that we're speculating. One is that there's just more transparency in the process. There were a lot of businesses that got loans that probably shouldn't have when it became public. They they were either looked upon unfavorably or they chose to give them back. Shake Shack, I think, was sort of the poster child of this. There's still a lack of clarity around forgiveness, but there has been certain things that suggest that maybe it's not quite as appealing as once thought, and there's still a lot more to come out on this. But I think it's safe to say that the fact that the SBA has come out and said they're going to audit every loan greater than $2 million. It is possible that all recipients will be, that'll be made public, that there'll be transparency in this. I think a number of these things it's decreased the appetite a little bit. It's been interesting. I think it's relevant as we talk about Utah. The most effective way to get a PPP loan, turns out, it was through small banks. Small banks did a really nice job shepherding their clients through this process, really ensuring that the applications were tight and dialed. That's how you have the greatest chance of success. Not easy to scale, but if you have a relationship with a small bank, they did a nice job. Big banks, I would say, probably struggle the most, just from a from a percentage of applicant perspective. If you had a private banker and you went and they took you through that process, you probably had success, but many didn't. I think worth noting that fintechs, given that we've got some fintechs we've talked about, we've had Divvy and Lendio on a couple of the town halls. They did a nice job of getting applications through. They processed them efficiently. There was a lower percentage of successful applicants, mostly because your application really needed to be tight and dialed. And we saw in small banks, they made sure that was the case. I think I'll just note a couple of things here that are interesting. Number one, Utah did better in the first round of PPP loans on a percentage basis. So, of the first $350 billion, we got about 1.28% that came to Utah, and we're slightly below 1% on the next $190 billion. Also interesting to note that the average loan size across the US has dropped from $206,000 to $73,000. And I actually believe that's a positive signal. The first time it just felt like those who had the right process, the right advisors, were able to get loans. And, we really worried about the true Main Street small businesses. What about those that didn't have those capabilities or resources? I think the good news is that what we've seen in this average loan size dramatically declining is that Main Street businesses who don't have balance sheets, they now have the ability to, they're getting loans. Say quickly, for Utah companies, commercial rental assistance program for small businesses. This is something that absolutely every small business, fewer than 100 employees as of February 15th, should be looking into. Coronavirus.utah.gov has information on that. We've been hosting these town halls. We have now done 5 that have been viewed over 16,000 times. Our 6 installments coming this Thursday, we're going to focus on pivots for small businesses, for Main Street businesses. But there's some others that we continue to feel energy around as we do the pulse surveys. Certainly mental health. We're going to do a second series or town hall on mental health. PPP forgiveness, of course, is a very hot topic. We're going to wait until we have enough information on that program. And then I think, we're starting to see some energy around just general financial health. Everyone clamored for free money. And I think small businesses are now who aren't as accustomed to strategic planning. They're now looking beyond PPP and forgiveness and saying, what does my runway look like? What are my financing options? They may not be free, but they may be available. And so we're going to talk about how a small business really gains access to other sources of capital, not free money from the federal government. Lastly, these are just some of the things that we continue to focus on. We're upgrading the slopeserves.com website. We really want this to be a great resource. The traffic has been it's surprised us. It's been a great resource. We want it to be more user friendly. We are focusing on the user interface. We're going to launch a website that's focused specifically on mental health. We're going to start a campaign there. We've got a really, really great team or subcommittee focused on this. And I think they're going to create some resources that are incredibly valuable to the state. Last couple of things, and then Clint, I'll turn it back over to you. Impact stimulus. So we've been having conversations with senators, with members of Congress. We've got a call today. Representatives Curtis and McAdams are going to join to talk about, really how we start to create an opportunity that's more advantageous to invest early stage in innovation. There's some great thinking that's been going on in terms of federal programs as well as at a state level. And then lastly, employability. How do we as Silicon Slopes begin to create access to employer-led skills-based development? And I think the employer-led is the part that matters the most. How do we really understand employer needs and connect them with those in Utah who are either unemployed, underemployed, or have the opportunity to upgrade their skills? And I think I would probably leave it there. There's some good things going on. Feel good about the work that the committee is doing, and hopefully we are serving those in the Silicon Slopes community well.
Jeremy, I have a quick question. So you have on Thursday's SMB series at 5 p.m. It's going to be about small business pivots. What advice do you have? I mean, just to preview that a little bit around pivots for small businesses and entrepreneurs during this time. And I'm thinking specifically about restaurants. You can imagine like the restaurant industry, which is getting impacted by this in such a significant way. Their whole business model, or at least a lot of their business model, is people walking through their doors.
Yeah.
Right. And it's really hard to adapt to, well, actually what the consumer wants now is to not go into your store, but to have it delivered. And that seems easy for like a Domino's or like a big company like DoorDash to try to figure that type of stuff out. But how do small businesses really figure that out?
Look, that's a good question. So there are a couple of things that I think we really want to focus on. One is, operationally, we've got this environment that we're going to be working within for the foreseeable future. And let's say it's 12 to 24 months until there's like real confidence around a vaccine. We feel safe operating generally the way that we used to. There are some short-term, just operational pivots. How do you make a customer feel safe? What is the environment like? And certainly restaurants is one, but in anything that's retail or customer driven, gyms, salons, all of these, there's an opportunity in the near term, but there are also some pivots that are strategic in nature, and thinking about how has consumer behavior changed today, and how is it going to continue to be changed a year, 2, 3 years from now? And there's no question. I mean, like consumers are never, although we may become comfortable in a new normal that we live in, there are certain behaviors that customers are adopting that it's important for businesses first to recognize, and then two, to get ahead of the curve and start to position their strategy and their resources, whether you're a sole proprietorship or you are a SaaS business. Things are changing, and that's not bad if you understand and you're willing to resourcefully adapt. And so, look, we think, and it's interesting, you look across sectors, there's a lot of changed consumer behavior. And I think a small business that tries to protect how they used to do business is going to find themselves in trouble down the road. So we hope to sort of not only provide some best practices and some specific ideas through our panelists, but really be a catalyst for thinking about how do you identify changed customer behavior, and then how do you start to innovate around it.
I want to bring Gavin Christensen, who's the founder and managing director of Kickstart Seed Fund, into this conversation. And Gavin, I want to talk to you about how some of your companies and entrepreneurs are specifically thinking about pivoting. But first, I don't even know the time. Time is totally irrelevant at this point. But so I'm going to say recently, yep. Kickstart announced their sixth fund. Is this number six? Fifth fund,
but I like the faith. Thanks for the faith.
Yeah, there'll be a sixth and a seventh and an eighth. And for those who don't know, Gavin is the OG of seed funding in the state of Utah. The first seed fund ever in Utah was Kickstart Seed Fund, and you've made it an incredible impact on the Silicon Slopes and Utah tech community, my friend. So congratulations on that. Can you first just kind of speak to this fifth fund and what that means for Utah?
I definitely can do that. Thank you so much for the kind words, and appreciate the leadership of Silicon Slopes, and specifically, during this tough time for our state, especially, Jeremy and the Economic Committee. I think, it's been amazing to see the public-private, partnership that I think this represents. And it's one of the reasons I think Utah is faring better than many of our peer states. So really appreciate that, and let's continue it. Yeah, so for us, Kickstart was started in the Great Recession, and so tough times, lean times when people don't really believe that the future may be as bright as the past are, those are, they're scary, but they're kind of comfy for us. We want to lean into those times. We feel like that could be a great moment to invest. The entrepreneurs that choose that moment to start their business, to embrace the change that's going on, end up, creating some of the amazing, core companies of Utah and our region of the future, right? Those are probably the new titans of Utah, are the folks that are able to get through this tough environment. So we certainly believe that. We also believe that, one of our mottos is let's not go backwards, right? We've all worked so hard to get Utah from this little state that could to a dynamic, vibrant tech community that's pulling more and more people in. And creating great job opportunities and changing the state in a real positive way. Let's not go backwards. And so this $110 million fund represents for us, it almost doubles the capital we have under management. And it allows us to be more active at this pre-seed and seed stage over the next 3 to 4 years than we've ever been. And we've been the most active investor in Utah for a while. We're happy that we join a bunch of other great investors that are investing at seed stages, Series A stages and beyond, as well as angels. And so I think for us, it's just, when Kickstart does well, it just means that, institutional investors are believing in what, this community can do. We're sort of, in some ways, a gauge of that because we have bet so hard on Utah. And we're excited. I mean, so that's sort of the fund, and I would say, for us, it allows us to be really active during a tough time, and we're excited to do that. I think if we think about our portfolio companies, there's a lot of pain. One way to think about it is there's kind of like a 10% part of the portfolio that is like shockingly doing better in the COVID environment. Maybe you're a telehealth company. One of these past town halls, we do have one of those, and I use the metaphor of it's kind of like you built this amazing this amazing little yacht, and you're just kind of sitting out there in the water, and then you just caught the tsunami and you're riding it for all it's worth. And that's kind of what telehealth companies, they were betting on behavior change. It took a long time. And the crazy thing about COVID and this environment is behavior change is happening fast. And that's creating opportunities for entrepreneurs to mix up industries that have taken decades. I mean, telehealth, multi-decade transformation process, but we're seeing amazing things there. Work from home companies. If you're someone that has collaborative software that enables people to be more productive, whiteboarding, something like Lucid, something like short form videos like Cloud App, others, you're seeing amazing results. On the flip side, if you are a business that serves the hospitality industry, even if you're a software company, or you're serving other businesses that really rely on face-to-face interaction to sell, you might have lost, up to 80-90% of your revenue in a few weeks. And that's a few of our companies are going through that. So, like Jeremy's saying, we anticipate that we're excited about the optimism that people are feeling right now. We're a little bit leery of the optimism in the public markets. We think that might be a little excessive. And we recognize we're not through this, so we just need to kind of, we bide our time and keep leaning into this. We might have another dip, we've got better testing capabilities. So we'll just see, but we're assuming it's years and not months, and that some of the behavior change is probably relatively sticky, around office space, around collaboration. It's shocking to hear the number of companies that say, hey, we're more productive, post-COVID than we were pre-COVID. Now, part of that's a crisis, and the fact that many of us, that we're lucky to still have jobs, our lives are kind of simple right now, right? We're grateful for our jobs. We're grateful for, whatever family we're able to be with, and we kind of work and do that. And it's kind of simple. That's probably not sustainable for a ton more months. But anyway, those are just a few observations. And most of our companies are kind of in that middle ground where they might have had to do a layoff. They might have had their revenue expectations for the year are probably down 20 to 30% on average. And our big motto throughout this has been survive first, then thrive. And surviving over the next 12 months is a win. And if you are a company that does survive and gets through it with your core value proposition intact, you're likely in a position with much less competitors to really win over the long term. We're fundamentally very long-term investors, and so we know the companies we're investing in now will probably still be involved for another 5 to 10 years. And so this environment creates that culture, that scrappiness, that commitment that will likely really pay off, we think, maybe a decade from now. So those are some initial thoughts, Clint.
Yeah, but as you mentioned, you started Kickstarter in the middle of a recession, in the Great Recession in 2008. What advice do you have for founders and early stage entrepreneurs right now who, you now have this new fund to invest in? What advice do you have in terms of the grit and determination that it's going to take to actually start a company in this environment?
Yeah. I mean, the quick story for me was, I was going to start a seed fund. It was going to be 20 million. It ended up taking me 2.5 years to raise $8 million. And so, my advice to our team and to our entrepreneurs is, what is the thing you're willing to do to achieve your dreams? What is the really hard thing that other people are not willing to do? And in this environment, and so for me, it meant, hey, I had to have another job. I lived in the state of New Mexico while working in Utah, and some really tough times for my family. And every entrepreneur has those stories and what they sacrificed. And in this environment, it's, those sacrifices are going to come a lot sooner. And so the advice, first off, is make sure you want to do it, right? And if you do want to do it, make sure you have co-founders that are equally committed, recognizing that capital is out there. There's a lot of money, but a lot of capital providers are retreating back to their core focus, so they might wait longer to invest than they normally would. They might be a little more risk averse because they're getting pressure. And so you're probably going to have to do, while, raising capital is like I say, I think it's more likely now in Utah probably than ever before. you might have to do more building your company the old-fashioned way, really focusing on customer validation. Make sure that the problem you're solving is a deep problem. It's not a problem that can be put off. It's not a vitamin. This is a painkiller. Um, the nice to have value propositions for consumers or businesses, those aren't getting funded right now, right? Because consumers aren't spending on them, and businesses are not spending on them. These have to be pretty important pain points. I call them pants on fire pain points. So that's another thing you really want to think about. Is like, how important is this issue I'm focused on? And then recognizing that you need to get validation from customers sooner rather than later. I think, all those things I think point to the style of companies that we build in Utah being at an advantage. We build real companies here, and they're more. There's more, more substance than style points often for our companies, and that's the kind of companies that I think are going to win in this environment.
What type of company specifically is Kickstart looking at, other than telehealth companies, which obviously you should be investing all day long in those? But beyond that, what type of companies are you looking at now? I'm sure your whole, has this changed your investment thesis at all into like the types of companies you want to fund in the future? Or are you just thinking like, we're going to be with this company for the next 5 to 10 years and let's think long term with it?
Yeah, it hasn't really changed it much, honestly. In fact, because we're anticipating that there's going to be less funding at the earliest stages, we're going to redouble our efforts despite a much larger fund to make sure we're investing as early as we ever have invested. So it's the same kind of thing. We care about large markets. We care about gritty, committed founders who we describe it as having deep founder opportunity fit. There's some reason that this entrepreneur cares about this particular niche, this pain point, this problem, more than the safety and comfort of taking just a job somewhere, right? There's some deep commitment, and that is a thread that we've found has been very common in our most successful companies. The last few weeks there's been some great news for Kickstart portfolio companies, companies like Lucid, Podium, Galileo Financial, and these are all examples of entrepreneurs who had a deep passion for solving a particular problem, and sometimes they had a tailwind, sometimes they didn't, but they stayed committed to it. Yeah, so I think for us, it's going to be a lot of B2B software as a service companies that we've always done. It's going to be a lot of B2B marketplace companies that are really, solving problems in a unique way in this environment. Healthcare IT, it's the theme is definitely going to be solving problems for consumers and businesses, using the power of machines, but doing it in a way that these are problems that can't be solved, they need to be solved urgently. And that's kind of where we've been. So I don't see it changing as much, but I think the only thing that might be a little bit different is that we're probably going to make more bets than we have, partly because we just want to make sure, if you don't sow the seeds, you don't get the trees, and we're going to make sure the seeds are out there and partner with other investors, angels, to make sure that happens.
I love to hear that. I love that you're going to go as early as you ever have, even with that size of fund. I think that's incredible. Thanks for everything you do, my friend. Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure.
Now I'm going to bring in the chair of the Governor's Office of Economic Development, the chair of Silicon Slopes Commons, the chair of my personal life, Corrine Clark. Corrine, how are you, my friend?
Doing well, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing good. Give us an update on everything happening in the state. You're basically the governor without the title, so speak to your fellow citizens.
I don't love politics, but you keep sticking me in there. So, while Jeremy says 8 weeks, I say 59 days, but who's counting? I think that the move to a moderate risk was important for the state because it means that the dials have turned where things are starting to open up a bit. I went to Market Street Grill and ate in the dining room for the first time since January. And part of that was to support my friend Simon Shaner. Part of it was just trying to get a feel for that. And most of the patrons didn't have on a mask, but all the servers did. My favorite restaurant in Orem has just opened up, and so it's exciting to see the changes. However, the state's worried that a lot of us as consumers are not going to feel comfortable going out into the population. And so while they want us to be really careful and still follow guidelines. I think the worst thing that can happen is that we get to a yellow stage of low risk, and our consumers are not going to go out and spend their money. One of the things that I was thinking about is that perhaps this virus has accelerated what was going to happen anyway, that over time, because of pollution and population, we're all going to have to work. Work will be where we are, not a place that we go to. And so that's like an interesting angle to look at. Jeremy mentioned the commercial rental assistance grant. It just opened today. It was created by Senate Bill 3006. And it's a way.
See, you even know the Senate bills. Look how ingrained you are in everything happening in our state.
No, just trying to pay attention, trying to do a good job for Silicon Slopes. That money will go quickly. So there's money earmarked for agriculture. There's money earmarked for small businesses, but those checks will probably be issued next week. And if the money's gone, the money's gone. So anyone that has interest and qualifies for that, please go and apply for that today. That's an important funding package that was made to help companies that have really been hit really hard. I think the state's is really trying to do a good job. I know that you and I were talking a little bit about Silicon Slopes has been taken on the chin the last couple of weeks. And I think of it as we threw ourselves into a hole and we made like a human ladder chain until everyone got out. And so while that might be the case that people are trying to knock us around a bit, it doesn't matter, because I think we've done a good job of working with our colleagues in the state. I get to work with Jeremy on his economic task force. And so we really have been really diligent to make sure we're doing the best we can to help across all of our companies. So not just Silicon Slopes companies, across all of the companies that are in the state. I have friends in New Jersey, New York, Hawaii, California. Every time I talk to them, they're like, you guys are so lucky, because you've had a great partnership with your state, but you can see your way to the end. So my friends in New Jersey, they don't even know where to get testing. They can't leave their house. If you go outside without a mask, like people will probably shoot you, because like people are so afraid of getting sick because their death rate is so much higher than ours. We're at such a low rate. Part of it's because we do what we're asked without having it like a directive for us is like a law. And we have a lot of open space in Utah, and we have a lot of preparedness in Utah. So I think we've done a pretty good job, but I don't think we're going to be open for business for a long time. And we talked about these bigger companies, it's not until 2021. So I think we're going to have to balance the growth that we need with the changes that had to be made. And I think it's always going to be changed.
What's going on with the Governor's Office of Economic Development, Karine? I know they've launched some programs. Have they put more money into this loan program too that they were working on?
So they had a third round that they'll keep trying to fund it, but it will depend on the legislature. The GOAS responsibility in their charter is to work with the state to make sure that we are attractive to other companies. And there's some folks that believe, okay, don't try to entice any more companies to come to the state, just put the money in our Utah companies. And I don't think that makes sense. I think that we still need to be a great place for businesses to come and open up their companies. So we just approved an incentive that'll be announced this week for a pretty nice company that has telehealth type tendencies that will be quite a few jobs in the state. And since we have so many displaced workers, these are jobs that are good paying that they could move into with just a little bit of training. And so we're trying to balance enticing companies to continue to bring their businesses to the state, but also make sure that our Utah companies are shored up and surviving.
Yeah, 8 weeks ago, I would have said, stop bringing more companies to the state of Utah. We can build them ourselves now. Like, just bring whoever you want. Who cares? Bring all the jobs, bring all the companies. We're in a whole different world.
With high wages, right? Like not a fan of like low wage jobs. I always want to know how much, how many jobs, and I want the highest wages.
Right. We're going to bring in one of Utah's premier tech companies, an OG in the tech world. We have the MarketStar CEO, Keith Titus, here with us. Keith, can you talk about how MarketStar is responding to all of this and what you're seeing?
Yeah, you bet, Clint. Thanks. The OG from Ogden. I'm actually looking out over 25th Street right now. It's just as quiet as it's been for a couple of weeks. Sad to see, but I think we can be proud of the resiliency in the state in general. MarketStar's faring well overall. I think, like a lot of companies, we've had to make adjustments. I think one of the big considerations is this concept of returning to office, right? Work's still happening for a lot of companies, and work is still vital. It's still needed. It's essential. And so I think as we've looked at, our landscape, we kind of find ourselves in a unique position where, as Gavin said, we're kind of a core critical fundamental for companies. We've been 33 years now. Driving revenue acceleration for companies. Our longest tenured client, Intel, 27 years as a client. We launched our newest client right as we were transitioning to work from home. Slack became our newest client right in the middle of this, and I think that kind of bookends the scenario that we're facing. But overall, we've got 1,300 employees around the world. We've got 150 employees in 27 states, 7 countries that we operate out of, and 3 offices here in Utah. And when you start thinking about, what does the next 6 to 9 months hold? I see us as business leaders are a key component of leading the industry back to confidence and leading consumers and businesses back to confidence. We can't resist, making some decisions that put some risk out there, and we have to make good, thoughtful, principle-based decisions and try and push our businesses forward. Our communities, our employees' families are counting on us as business leaders to do that. When I look at MarketStar, we're driving somewhere around $5 billion of annual quota for our clients. We're a pure play B2B company. When you look at the macroeconomic environment under which we're working in, many of our clients are pretty critical, software applications that are essential in this work from home environment. And as a result of that, we've seen some clients that have had, their best months ever in the last few months from a revenue generation perspective. I think we're a lot like any other company. We've got, a third of our workforce is terrified to go outside and terrified to understand, hey, what's the expectations around coming back to work? And a third are in that boat of, yeah, I'll come back to work, come back to the office, no problem. Just make sure there's some good safety precautions in place and there's a good plan and there's communication of that plan. And then another third, they're in that boat of, hey, let's just get back to normal as soon as possible. And it's a good balance around, the geographic conditions, the client expectations and employee expectations around those kinds of decisions. But, I think, I have some slides I'm happy to send to the group. I think some of the things you want to, hear from us, Clint, is kind of how are we thinking about that return to office and what are the approaches that we've been considering. I think a lot of businesses are functioning with a really good, effective business continuity plan. I think that's a critical component to making these decisions. It's a good partnership between, Silicon Slopes and our community leaders around the timing for those kinds of things. As a company, we've really appreciated the state of Utah's approach relative to the staging and the risk planning and having the ability to move from a moderate risk to a lower risk to a new normal, I think is a really healthy framework around which we've been planning. I think, as we look at kind of the next, for us, we've had originally put a date out there of May 4th and really gave us enough time to see what happened through March and April. We've adjusted that date for return to our offices, and we've adjusted that to June 26th to kind of see what happens with these, restrictions being removed or lessened, seeing how the contraction rate looks like, testing rates, both antibody testing and other testing rates. And Overall, we fully intend to stay on that track. But I think in this environment, you have to be willing to be adaptable and flexible. There is no definitive path forward, and we've built a plan around that with June 26th as a target date. Start moving off, individuals back into the office, moving them back with, effective precautions and practices and policies, but be willing to adapt and adjust if the market requires it, or the community requires it, or employees. It's interesting to see employees. I know that Jeremy talked a little bit about this on the sentiments. When you look at the sentiments today, we track the sentiments of our employees on a weekly basis, and if we had 89% engagement pre-COVID on a week-to-week engagement kind of index, we're seeing high 90s to mid 94, 95% engagement. But we also have a relatively young workforce. Our average age is probably in that 28 to 29-year-old range. And a big portion of their social network is tied up in work as well. And I think some of them are really looking for that social engagement as well. But overall, feeling pretty good about our plans, and the engagement we're hearing is good communication matters, clarity in policies are mattering, reasonable expectations are mattering relative to employees' confidence in coming back to work.
Keith, can you just real quick on that? It would be interesting to hear how you and MarketStar are managing the culture and the morale of the team now that, everyone's working from home.
Yeah, Clint, it's a really interesting question. We had a really unique situation that last year, we as a management team affected a divestiture of MarketStar from Omnicom, which is a large publicly traded financial holding company. Had been great partners, great supporters of MarketStar over the years, but saw really an opportunity to bring the company back to local Utah ownership with Wasatch Group and our investors there. And as we progressed through the first year of post divestiture, we'd spent a lot of time. I personally had spent a lot of time doing kind of an employee listening tour, an employee and customer listening tour, to really find out what was on their minds, what were the concerns that they were having. And it really culminated in this need to reestablish our culture and provide some clarity around it. And I'm not kidding you, the Thursday, the 17th of March was the day we were going to launch our new values. And we actually transitioned everybody to work from home earlier that week. And so we postponed the launch of the values, and we intend to come back to it. But absent that, we as a management team really decided, hey, let's not worry about launching it. Let's just live the values and let that be felt in the lives of our employees. One of the things I think has been a critical component has been communication. There's always room for us as leaders to evolve and adjust how we communicate, but there's never a more important time to be transparent and to be honest and to be clear with our employees. And so we've really leaned in on that. That has increased the level of confidence and trust in all levels of management across our employees. And I talk to employees every week. I do 2 group huddles every single week, somewhere between 7 to 8 per huddle. And that really allows me to get a sense directly how people are feeling, and B, allow them to ask the hard questions that sometimes they don't want to ask in a larger town hall type setting. But across the board, it starts from a top-down perspective: be transparent, be communicative, provide clarity, make the hard decisions and communicate them when you have to. Enlist management in that, but do it in a consistent way. And I think that's helped us overall.
Keith, thanks so much. We'll probably have you back on, even on a live, to even go deeper on how MarketStar is, thriving in the middle of all of this. It really is impressive. And as I mentioned, MarketStar, one of the OGs, I think it was before it was ever called Silicon Slopes or anything, just up there in Ogden doing incredible work. So thanks for coming on, my friend. I want to make sure that everybody watching this tunes into Thursday's SMB series. As Jeremy mentioned, it's the 6th installment of that thing. It's about business pivots. You'll want to check that out. I'm going to check that out. I think that's a fascinating, maybe I'll pivot. Maybe what we'll do is we'll pivot Silicon Slopes. That'd be awesome. Pivot right around this. I won't talk about it. And then, so that's Thursday, 5 p.m., the SMB series. Make sure you check that out. And we will see everyone again Monday at 5 p.m. or Monday at 4 p.m. for this town hall. Thanks so much.